Hi guys, Dr. Loretta here. So by the end of this video, you're going to be able to identify and learn ways of dealing with a toxic workplace. Toxic workplace is one of the leading causes of workplace-related burnout. There's this saying that people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. And in most cases, toxic work environment is a resultant effect of bad leadership. Some other times it could be co-workers. However, that toxic behavior is being condoned by leadership and other times not. Culture is a way of life of any people, and a toxic work environment is indicative of a toxic work culture where negative behaviors such as manipulation, bullying, yelling, and so on take place and are condoned, which the resultant effect of that is high levels of stress at work, low motivation, low productivity, infighting amongst co-workers, discrimination, and the lack of trust becomes the norm. This is way more than low pay and any other reasons why you think that people actually do quit their jobs. The benefit of having this conversation is the potential negative effect that this can have on our mental well-being. Being in a toxic work environment can lead individuals to feeling anxious, depressed, cynical, resentful, angry, stressed, and burnt out. Working in a toxic work environment leaves you experiencing heightened physical and emotional reactions towards your workplace, leaves you feeling exhausted and dreading going to work. I have found myself in toxic situations where people say things like, "Oh, you're not like they say you are. I don't know why people say what they say about you. You're different than I thought you would have been." And mind you, these are individuals in that space that I've barely had interactions with. But what a toxic work environment does is they discredit people before other people. They falsify information that is being portrayed around that establishment. They bring down people even before other people get to even know them and get to experience them. And having that preconceived notion about that individual in that workspace, even those that haven't interacted with them now have a preconceived notion about them that sometimes is not necessarily true, but because it's being propagated, they just run with it. That individual ends up not getting the opportunity to be able to tell their side of the story, or for people to get to even experience them as an individual, because there's this soil in the water about that individual that it's not always necessarily true. What this ends up leading to is stunting that individual's growth in that environment, because people now have a preconceived notion about them and then don't give them opportunity for growth, for getting to climb up the ladder, getting to do other things, because someone has already damaged that individual's name. The other thing that being in this toxic work environment can do to that individual is that it creates a high level of stress for that individual. That individual is walking on eggshells around that environment. That individual has to work twice or even more harder than every other person in that environment to be able to even lift their head up, so long as that toxicity continues to breed, which is very stressful for that individual, which could lead to other things like anxiety, stress, depression, burnout, whatever you want to mention that could be the potential resultant effects of this toxicity. While we go over the signs of a toxic work environment, I do highly encourage you to pass yourself through this lens to ensure that you're not the toxic one in the mix. Because I've also seen situations where people talk about toxic work environment. However, they are the toxicity in the mix. They are the ones stirring up the drama. They are the ones trash talking people. They are the ones bringing people down, bullying, hazing, whatever of other people. But yet they are the ones complaining about the toxic environment, because the fact that you're the one complaining about toxicity does not make you the victim. So I do highly encourage you to be humble enough to pass yourself through this lens to make sure that you're not the toxic one in the mix. Now let's take it to the signs that you might be working in a toxic environment. Recognizing the signs of a toxic work environment is the first step to addressing workplace toxicity. There are many signs of a toxic work environment. However, I'll only be sharing a few with you, but feel free to drop in the comment section other signs of a toxic work environment that I might have omitted. Because I know some of you are currently in that situation or have been in that situation, and you might know some that I probably have missed. Number one sign is a telltale sign which you can almost never go wrong with, which is abnormally high turnover rate. This is a situation where a job can hardly keep employees. It's like a revolving door where people are constantly in and out of that job. This is a situation where people are quitting their jobs, not because they don't like the job, not because they are not being paid well in the job or proximity of the job to their home and whatnot. This is a situation where people are quitting a job even when they like the job or even when the job favors them. This is a situation where in that establishment, you see that majority of the people that work there have only been there for a short time with no real seniority. I've been at jobs where you see people have been working at that job for like 15 years, 17, 20 years, 10 years, 5 years. But these types of jobs, you see people haven't worked there for like a year or less, and just very few people have worked a little bit more than that in that establishment, which are usually the toxic ones in the mix. In these types of situations, irrespective of how well the job pays or how great their benefit is, they just cannot retain staff. Another sign of a toxic work environment is 2. Situations where leadership are talking ill about other staff in front of you. I've been in those type of situations before, and I tell you that that's one of the most uncomfortable situations to be in, and unfair to that staff to be put in that type of situation, because bearing in mind that this is a leader and that staff is torn between integrity of standing up for their co-workers and not trashing their co-workers in front of the leader, and also that awkward position of, I also don't want to disrespect this leader. So I tell you, that's one of the most uncomfortable work situations I would say have ever found myself in, because I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know what to say other than just nodding my head and like, which was so weird. And I left. I think for me, I was also caught off guard. So maybe that was also why I didn't really know how to respond. Also, given when you have a leader that you have such respect for from a distance, and coming close and seeing that is like, what the what? But here's something to note. The same way that that leader is talking ill about other employees in front of you, it's the same way they will talk ill about you to other staff. So if you find yourself in that situation, don't get too comfortable and think that that leader is only having that conversation with you because they like you. That's not the case. That's a toxic leadership trait. And believe it or not, when you're not there, they talk the same way about you to other people. And as a leader, there are some behaviors you just cannot engage in. One of which is gossiping about your employees, most especially to other fellow employees. Which leads me to my next point, which is point 3, which is work-life imbalance. In this type of situation, the pride of being a hard worker is overworking people. There are no boundaries, or the boundary lines are blurred, with no differentiation between work and home life. This type of situation leads to burnout because employees are not able to unwind, decompress, and usually the home life is the one that suffers for it. Let's get this straight so that we don't confuse it. Depending on the type of job you do, some jobs will require you to stay up late sometimes, respond to messages after work hours, take calls at odd hours of the night. For instance, as a clinician, when I'm on call, I'm required to wake up in the middle of the night or any time of the night when a call comes through to answer that call and consult. There are other situations where I'm even required to get up get dressed, and drive to the emergency room to assess that patient. So let's not get it confused. But even in those type of situations, I'm not the one having to do that all the time, all year round. That can lead to burnout, even if it's a requirement for a job. But this is where the balance comes in, where we do that rotation, where this week is me, next week is somebody else. Before the rotation comes back to me, it's giving me enough time to rest, recuperate, decompress, unwind, whatever word you want to put in there. Outside of those exceptional situations or circumstances, the expectation of your job should not be that you're always available to work at any given time of the day, when you're working on the weekends. It's gotten to the point where there's no difference between your weekday and your weekend. And worst of all, making this a marker for you to get promotion, recognition, or opportunities. Leading to my next point, which is a common one that most of us can probably relate to, which is 4, micromanaging. Leadership provides oversight to the job that is done. So there's nothing wrong for a leader to request information, updates, and provide oversight to the job, like supervising the job that is being done. However, where the problem lies with micromanaging is that lack of independence to make decisions, execute a job, where you're needing to run every single thing you have to do or you need to do by someone or through someone for their approval, and there's that lack of independence. Here's what that does to that individual. It leads to stagnation because there's no avenue for growth. There's that lack of opportunity to act independently, bring your individuality, a lack of inclusive environment that encourages diversity of ideas, values, thoughts, the absence of avenues for skill enhancement, of career growth. It stifles your creativity and dwindles motivation and ambition. People get complacent if they do not have the chance to grow and learn and feel stifled. Most times people identify leaders and people in leadership as the reason for a toxic workspace. However, there's an underdog to this, which leads me to point 5, a negative workspace. Leaders and leadership alone do not make up a workspace. Employees do too. It takes two to tango. And if a workspace is toxic, employees are also contributing factor. In fact, could be the leading factor to the toxicity in that workspace. This is characterized by low morale, dishonesty with a lack of trust, people going behind each other's back to talk them down before leadership, or even make up things that are not even truth to leadership. Most times when this is done, it is done to seek favor in the eyes of leadership. Other characteristics of a toxic work environment, from a leadership standpoint, you will see there's a clear favoritism playing out, where it is evidently clear that the leader favors a certain person or a certain group of people. On the side of the employees, you see a lot of gossiping, talking negatively about others, running to leadership at the slightest opportunity instead of using your conflict resolution model to resolve that issue, falsifying information about others to make them look bad. You see bullying, hazing, and racism in that environment. Another leading sign of a toxic workspace, which in this situation is geared more towards leadership, leads me to my point 6, which is they lack accountability for actions. In this type of situations, this leader blames the subordinate for everything that goes wrong and would only take accountability when that situation is favorable. As a leader, if anything goes wrong with your organization, you are accountable, irrespective. This is one of the perks of leadership. This is characterized by a lack of accountability, not accepting faults where and when necessary, which can lead to a lack of trust with leadership. Having strong leadership skill is necessary for running an effective organization. As minute as my next point is, it carries a grave consequence that has the potential of affecting people's mental and emotional well-being, which leads to my point 7, which is zero tolerance. There's no room for error or mistakes. Human beings are prone to mistakes. This is one of the ways with which we learn, grow, and improve. If you have a workspace that has zero tolerance for error, what ends up happening is that people are afraid to take risk and will not take risk. They are walking on eggshells. They are checking and double checking their work constantly, which is an anxiety-ridden environment, and it's not a safe environment or conducive environment for anybody to work in. Also, this type of work environment stunts individuals' growth, which leads me to my next point, point 8, inconsistencies. Every job has a job description, mission, goals, and expectations. But when that expectation is not clearly communicated, or it's not even communicated at all, individuals in this situation feel like the goalpost is constantly moving and are never meeting target. They always feel like the expectations are constantly changing and feel like they are never doing enough. These individuals feel stagnant, defeated, like they are not making progress irrespective of efforts that they are putting in, and always feel like they are not doing enough. My next point is one I've brought up a lot, which sometimes people seem not to agree with me and will say things like, well, they're getting paid for their job, that's their appreciation for their job, which I would not discredit them because it's their opinion and they're entitled to it, right? Which leads me to my point 9. Never commending your workers. In this type of situation, individuals are not appreciated for the job they do, and in some situations, they are told that they are not doing enough, or the work they do goes unnoticed or unappreciated. This type of environment breeds a lack of motivation and leaves these individuals feeling disconnected from the job they do. Irrespective of the fact that the reasons people bring up as to why commending your workers is not such a big deal can seem logical, but there's nothing wrong with appreciating your staff. As an employer, it does not take anything from you to appreciate your employees. A little thank you can go a long way. It can boost morale, increase productivity, and it is encouraging. Which leads to my next point, 10, which is cliques. In this type of situation, you see cliques like what you would see in high school, like the mean girls. They just hang with themselves and they isolate anyone that is not in their clique. In this type of situation, trust is damaged, animosity is fostered, there's a lack of inclusion, demoralization, leaving individuals isolated and not feeling like they are part of a team. As a team, how are you able to achieve the same goal and be on the same page when you're all paddling in different directions? Leading to my next point, 11, microaggressions. Microaggressions are subtle interactions or behaviors that communicate some sort of bias towards historically marginalized groups, specifically those from different gender, race, religion, or ethnicity. They can be verbal or nonverbal, intentional or unintentional, but definitely hostile, derogatory, or negative. This is an uncomfortable situation or environment for anybody to be able to work effectively from and can be exhausting. Leading to my last but not the least point, which is 12, poor communication. The role of good communication cannot be overemphasized. However, in this type of situation, there is a lack of transparency, uncertainty, and distrust. Communication is prime for any type of relationship, let alone a work environment. In this type of situation, there's no clear or proper communication from top down or the other way around, or where input is not sought after or sought for. This type of situation is characterized by vague communication, or communication is non-existent. There's a close line of communication between leadership and subordinates. There's a lack of clarity on job roles, schedules, expectations, Non-assertive style of communication is utilized. Different messages concerning a certain task is disseminated among team members, which can lead to discord as different team members have different information regarding that task or regarding expectations. Before we continue, if you're yet to, please take the time to like to help with the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe so that you can always get notification for educative posts like this, and share with your friends and your loved ones so they can join us on this journey to mental wellness. And if you stick with me to the end, I will be sharing with you ways of dealing with workplace toxicity. Dealing with workplace toxicity is very necessary. Most people quit their job outrightly once they find themselves in a toxic environment, which should not be your first line of action. We can be the change we so desire. Most times what we do is that we quit that job and leave that toxic work environment to continue to thrive. Most times people just want to move on from that negativity. And I get it. I have been guilty of that crime. But what ends up happening is that negative pattern and that toxicity just continues to thrive. Working in a toxic environment can be stressful. And in order for you to thrive in that toxic environment, you can do so by following one of the tips or some or all of the tips I'll be sharing with you today. 1. Talk to your supervisor. This needs to be your very first step, and in my opinion, the most important step. Let your supervisor know what situation you're going through, and being in a position of authority, they are able to effect change, address whatever that toxic situation is, move people around in the job or move offices around, and are able to accord punishments where and when necessary. And if it's not addressed by your supervisor, then follow your chain of command and funnel your complaints upwards. 2. Find a supportive network. Not everybody is going to like you, and that's okay. And you would need to be okay with that. Instead, focus your energy on positive people around you who care about you, care for you, and are interested in your well-being. Surround yourself with positive relationships that help you grow, thrive irrespective of your work situation, and provide you support. These individuals can help mentor you, provide you guidance, provide you a different perspective, and they can also be a tool for you to vent. Which leads me to a point that most of us tend to neglect, which is 3. Document, document, document. If you do not document, or if you did not document, then it did not happen. This can easily sound bad because people will think that you're waiting to catch someone doing something wrong so that you can report them, but you just never know. I know that I've been in situations where, because I did not document, then it was always like my word against theirs. Save email chains of conversations, receipts, records, anything that will be a proof of conversations that has occurred, so that in any case where these reports are made and they launch an investigation, you have evident proofs that you can use to validate your claims, so that it doesn't end up being a he said, she said type of situation, and a situation where it's just your words against theirs. This can also serve as credible evidence that you can present to HR or leadership, which leads me to my point 4. Quit. It's not every situation that requires you to put up a fight. There are some situations that winning is actually walking away. Before you do this, make sure that you're actually dealing with a toxic environment, not a situation that you're just not being liked. If you have tried every possible avenue to fix this toxic work situation and it's just not fixing, then this might be a time for you to walk away, most especially if it is beginning to affect your mental well-being. Before quitting, make sure to take some steps before making that happen, to include making sure that you've secured something outside before leaving so that you don't leave yourself high and dry. The other part of it is, during your exit interview, make sure to be honest, even though you're leaving that job. at least you have an opportunity to effect a change for those that are coming behind you to that job. Imagine if other people that left before you did that, then you probably would not have had to deal with that toxicity in that workplace. 5. Coping skills. Focusing on your well-being is very necessary when you are in a toxic work environment or dealing with workplace toxicity. We hold stress in our body, and as such, we can experience some physical symptoms, of which some targeted exercises or activities can help relieve or release some of that stress and tension in our body. Example of such would be breathing exercise, physical exercise, a massage, meditation, and other mindfulness practices can help reduce stress and anxiety. Positive affirmations, practicing self-love, journaling can help calm and quiet your mind and your body and reduce stress. Practice gratitude. Being thankful can help shift your focus and perspective. Leading on to point 6, which is get help. Get help from a professional like a life coach or a therapist. They can work with you to come up with goals on how to cope with this situation, teach you coping skills, boundaries, assertive communication, how to respectfully stand up for yourself and be your best advocate. Like I always say, talking to a professional is always an answer, most especially when done appropriately. You can never go wrong with therapy in the hands of the right therapist.